Hi guys, this is Ritu Sharma and you watching me on DESIblitz.com.
DESIblitz.com.
Share your experience of coming to the UK and why you did.
Sure I can, of course. So I came to the UK 20 years ago, Samya. I was a teacher back in India as well. So I had a good job, I had a good life, I was settled, I was good. It was my ex-husband's dream to move over to UK. So I uprooted myself, followed him, came here, thinking we'll build a life together here. So in a nutshell, that's how it happened.
And did you face any cultural shocks?
Oh, massive cultural shocks, massive.
What were some of those? What surprised you?
Everything really. I mean, it's a whole different world. If you know India, if you know Indian world, Punjab, which is still not as developed as metros, big cities in India, we were still very close units and small cities, smaller places. Culturally, we were very like certain type of people. You come here, you cannot relate to anything. And because my biggest disadvantage, I'd say, of moving here was I had no family, no friends, no acquaintances even here. So I was literally pretty much left on my own with a little baby and just a husband, and that was about it. And here we don't have this culture of reaching out to the neighbours, knocking on the door, saying hello, you're new here, if you need anything, let us know. So I pretty much was quite isolated for a very long time. And if I'm honest, looking back, I think it took about a year and a half, if not longer, to kind of understand how things work, or started to understand, not even say understand wholly, but started to understand how things work, what the systems are around here, transportation, how should you speak to people, because of course culturally how I used to talk to people back home is very different to how people speak to each other here. So culturally I think it was a massive shock to my system.
And how did you navigate learning the new cultural dynamics of how to engage with people? That must have been, as
that
you
was
said,
just
scary.
bumping into things and kind of making sense of them on your own, because there was nobody to guide or hold hand. And although there are people and organizations who would have guided and held hands, I was just not aware of them. So as I say, I was just pretty much left on my own to my own devices. And I'm grateful that I was educated, I was a professional, and I had no language barrier. That helped massively. But still, it was bumping into walls and things and people, and then kind of making sense of things, of, where do I stand with them? How should I work with them? It took a very long time to settle in.
And were there any expectations of you as a South Asian woman that further impacted your experiences of trying to
If
integrate?
I start talking about, how long do we have?
Yeah, no, you carry on.
Yeah, so that there always are expectations as a South Asian woman. There are always expectations attached to you, even if they've not been said, even if they're not being stated clearly. So you're a South Asian woman, you've got to be a good daughter. You're a South Asian woman, you've got to cook and clean, and you've got to look after your children. And you're a qualified professional South Asian woman. Yes, you should go out and work and earn your living as well. You should be able to contribute towards the bills and mortgages. But then when you come back home, you'll hang your intellect at the doorstep on the coat hanger. You'll walk in as a second-class citizen. I'm sorry if I'm sounding really pushily, negative here. But I suppose in most South Asian cultures and setups, this is still the case. And that's attached to us no matter what. And if we take a standing, and when we take a standing against this expectation, you've got to work through it. You've got to work for it. It's never handed to you offered to you in a plate to say, oh, you work, or you have certain level of intellect, or you're better than just spending your time cooking and cleaning. And don't get me wrong, they are important parts of your life. And I've loved looking after my children and bringing them up and keeping them healthy and safe and clean. But sometimes that should not be the obligation. That should not come as a part and parcel of you because you're a South Asian woman. Sometimes you should be able to take a break from there. And then, to be honest, Samia, I think the expectations that are had of a South Asian woman in a family setup are totally unrealistic. It's one person you're talking. So that one person also had something called mental health that can get affected, also has emotions that need to be vented sometimes, expressed, dealt with. They'll also get angry at times. They'll also get confused. They'll also feel lost at times. They also feel burdened at times. I can go on, but I totally believe that the social setups we have, especially at family level in South Asian cultures, the expectations we have of our women, they're unrealistic. It's one person you're talking, for God's sake, give her a break. Allow her, let her be.
And when it comes to the pressure you're saying you felt and the mental health struggles, what did that mean for you at the time with your relationship and trying to integrate into a new society culture?
So to be honest, I was very unaware at the time of what I was going through as well. And I was very unaware of its implications. But what I did feel was very high level of anxiety and distress. And because I'd left everything behind, my job, my family, my culture, my familiarity of anything really, and I come to this new world, not knowing what to expect, it took a big toll on my mental health. My anxiety was through the roof, but I did not know it was such. I had a little baby on me when I came to the country. She was 6 months old. I had a husband back then who did not care, who did not want to help, who would not even empathize if I was upset. Forget doing anything physically. He would not literally contribute to anything. So I may have gone to work all day and come back, and he'd been at home. He'd still leave me with my little child and walk out while I was still at the doorstep to go meet his friends, go to the pub, have a night out, without any consideration of myself. So the implication was that it took a big impact on my mental health. I was unaware, and in that time, I believed it was for me to deal with it. And that's the way we've been brought up. That's the way I was brought up, Samia, that you don't reach out about your problems to anyone, you deal with them. And you're a woman. You should be able to handle your home. You should be able to handle your child. Nobody told me if you're tired, you could take a break. Nobody told me if you're upset, you should go out and speak to someone. I did not know of any of these things. I was quite unaware, quite oblivious to the facts, to the reality of it.
And did you ever talk to your family back in India, Punjab, about what you were going through at the time?
I never did, no.
No. And what this feeling of being a second-class citizen and being obligated to work and then come home and do all the housework, all the labour there, did that take a strain on your relationship with your husband?
It absolutely did. But as I say, I did not see it as a direct impact of me doing too much at one time. I saw it as something that was lacking in me. So it further kind of bounced off back to me, putting myself really further down. And I kept doing that every single time anything at all went wrong. And because the surroundings, including the ex-husband, he kept blaming me for anything that went wrong. Very narcissistic approach, to be honest, if you just put it in a nutshell. And I had no idea what narcissism is. And I had no idea what domestic abuse looks like. And I had no idea where things could go from there. And state of unawareness, if you like. So it took a very, very long time to realize where I had got to. And when I did, I think the damage was too huge to contain. So yes, absolutely did have an impact on the relationships.
You are a vocal advocate of women's empowerment, do a lot of work, encourage women to challenge taboos and dismantle expectations that are conservative, problematic, and pigeonhole women. From your personal experience, you've talked about you weren't aware you were in a situation of domestic violence. What triggered your awareness and desire for change?
Trigger is a gentle word here. Nothing triggered the change. What happened was it got to a point which was where it was obviously whatever was happening around me was wrong, and nobody was ready to voice it for me, and nobody was ready to support my voice either. Not family. Most of the friends left me. Literally, I was left on my own devices again. And that made me question everything. I was at a point where my kids were still young and I had to leave my home unplanned because there was physical violence involved. Prior to that, there had been abuse, but it was more emotional, financial, and mental abuse. But this time it was physical. And being an educated woman, I think I understood that this was it, and that I did not want my children to be audience to that kind of a thing, and start to expect this to be normal, and in their future life as well, that they believe that this is okay to let it happen. So I think the biggest motivation, if you like, was my children, and that was the start of the change. Basically, I totally knew within myself that I had to leave. There was no going further from this point onwards, and that's when I left.
Realized you had to leave for you and your children. Did you think that you wouldn't have the support of your family and friends?
I wasn't sure whether they would, whether they won't, but I knew regardless I had to do it. But further down, it did make itself really clear that I was not going to get any support from anyone.
So you had to build yourself up.
Absolutely. From very broken, shattered, tiny pieces of me, I had to put them together, and I had to glue them together. And it's taken a very, very long time, Samya. All I've ever said is it's very difficult to do this kind of a thing, but it's so worth it. It's so worth sticking up for yourself, voicing your opinions, and not letting anyone take you for granted or abuse you. It's so worth the effort.
Do you think there's been a change within the South Asian community? Is there still stigma when a woman decides for any reason to leave a marriage?
There absolutely is still a big stigma around that. And that, therefore, I got no support, as I said. We're talking 11 years ago. I got no support whatsoever from anybody. And my biggest thing was that, unfortunately, I wasn't aware of the societies and the organizations and charities that were there to help. And I was failed at that end as well, because the agencies that I did approach to, they failed to signpost me as well. But there is a huge stigma in the South Asian communities even now. And although there's a very, very gradual change happening, I believe it's going to be a very long time before we actually start to see it as okay. that if something's not working, there is no need to drag it. If it's damaging you further as a person, protect yourself, walk away. And there are so many women out there I've seen and I've known and I've spoken to, and I was one in the past who thought, I'll stay because I've got children, because I don't want to take their father away from them. But I'll tell you now, if children grow up in an abusive, toxic environment like that, they will grow up thinking that this is the norm. So the girls will then start to think that if a partner's abusing them, it's okay, because they've seen their mum go through it. And the boys will start to abuse their partners because they think it's okay, they've seen their dad do it. So I'm telling anyone who's listening that if you're doing it for your children, thinking you're doing it for your children, that's the wrong reason. There are reasons when people don't leave, and there are some valid reasons, and I'm not saying everyone should leave. There are ways and means of tackling it, dealing with it, and each situation is unique in itself. Leaving is not always the best thing to do. I'm not saying leave, but if it's a threat to your life directly or your children's safety, then please leave.
And through your experiences, you've done a lot of advocacy work around domestic violence, raising awareness within the British South Asian community of the issues and what needs to change. What are the key factors for you that need to happen for positive change to occur?
Education is the first and foremost one. Education is the answer to any questions, big questions we have today. Be it social change, be it political change, be it any popular or unpopular opinion that's doing good or bad to the world. Educating our younger generations, our older generations as well, not just younger generations, because when we educate our older ones, the younger ones will be impacted on their own. But definitely educating the younger ones and helping them see. Now, in our cultures, our communities, Samya, you'd appreciate, we don't have no terms for domestic abuse. We don't have a term. In Punjabi, I don't know what domestic abuse is called. The only word that comes to my head is Karelu Vivad, but that's conflict. That's not abuse. That means domestic conflict, not abuse. We don't have a word for abuse. So if we don't have terminology that tells us what's what, how are we ever going to be able to explain to anyone in our language what does it mean? And that's why I think it's so easily brushed under the carpet, because we don't know how to talk about it. We still don't know how to deal with it because we don't know what the problem exactly is. So educating our young girls and boys, because we don't want abusers, we don't want victims, or we don't want abusers either. Educating people around the problem and accepting that there is a problem. Our communities will deny it totally. You go to religious establishments, you try and talk to women about this, and these officials there, people in authority, they'll tell you, oh, our community has never encountered anything like that. Hell, they haven't. But that's what we used to do it. We used to just denying that there's a problem. So unless we accept there's a problem, I guarantee you we cannot find a solution. So if you want to find a solution, we've got to accept there's a problem, and then we need to start having open chats about the problem and find ways of getting to the solution. Education, full stop.
You do a lot of work in this area, advocating for women's rights, highlighting and raising awareness of domestic violence.
Yeah.
How you said there's still organisations, religious institutes in the UK that are within the South Asian community that are still silent on the issue, that don't acknowledge it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'll give you a very direct example. We were planning a project, so we went to a couple of religious organisations, and they're different, varied religious organizations, not a particular one. So we went to kind of all of them, and most of them just said no to support us for whatever reasons they stated, right? So now we don't have time, we don't have room, we don't have the energy, or whatever they said. And so, right, and the other two particular ones, and they're different religions, they're not the same. Two different religious institutions replied with, we have never seen any of these problems happen in our community, so we think it's not for us, it's not relevant to us. And I bet you these South Asian communities we're talking about, they do have these issues, but they totally denied any existence of this. So there was nothing doing from there on. So we just couldn't do anything at all.
Were you shocked to hear that?
I was annoyed. Badly annoyed. I was really annoyed at that. And as much as I wanted to tell them the facts that they were trying to hide, because I know I'm a South Asian woman who has lived experience, and I'm very closely involved in these communities. So I know I was very annoyed at what was being said. But then I decided I did not want to work with them anyways, because if that's their approach towards a massive problem that our women are facing, and they're totally in denial of any existence of that problem, they're obviously not going to be a part of the solution then.
And you talked about the fact that when you realised you were in a violent situation and had to leave, when you tried to reach out for support, you didn't know where to go, and they didn't know where to direct you when you reached out to a support service. Do you think it's gotten better for women from the South Asian community now?
I think many of these government offices, the people they have on the forefront, on the front desk, these people are not trained to a level to be able to deal with situations like this. And it's not their fault. I was very angry at that as well for a very, very long time, Samya. But I've realised it's not their fault. If they've not seen anything in their personal life or professional life, and they've never come across something like this closely, they would not know what to do, how to deal with it. And so there are gaps in the education, again, in the training part of things. There are more open conversations happening now, I believe, or at least they're happening around where I go to, so maybe that's the thing. But I see that there are way more organizations working on it now, which is great. And I think if each one of us started doing the tiny bit that we can do, this big huge giant of domestic abuse will still take a few centuries to be tackled. So to answer your question, I feel there's lots of support out there for women, but it's also knowing what support to tap into, who to ask, and that's again being aware of your surroundings and knowing someone who'll be able to help you. So there is loads happening. There are loads of support groups and organizations doing some great work. But yeah.
And do you think it's culturally nuanced? Because the South Asian community is diverse, it's rich, and it's a key part of British society.
Yeah.
And in Britain, domestic violence, the government, policymakers have emphasised it needs to be addressed, especially in the context of women as victims facing abuse. But do you think there's culturally nuanced support that shows an awareness of the cultural difficulties a woman may face?
Culturally, we are not ready to face the whole thing. Honestly, blatantly accept it and admit that we have a huge problem. I still think we're not there yet. Some people have started to have conversations about it, and that will open doors to a solution, or finding ways of dealing with it, educating more people. But as a cultural community, South Asian community, I think many people still feel very reluctant talking about things like this.
And do you think services are becoming more aware and able to address that barrier and reach the people they need to?
That's a really good question, because services have always been there, right? So do they reach to the people out there? So if I give you my example, for instance, I was an educated woman in her late 20s and early 30s when I was going through domestic abuse. I was a professional, qualified teacher. I was earning my own money, so I was not dependent on anyone financially. I was vocal. I'm a confident speaker. I was a teacher. I could speak, right? And when I left the house, I had a big smile on my face. And that's a cultural thing again. When we meet people, we'll smile. No matter what, no matter what's gone in the background, when you get out of your house, you bump into somebody, you go, "Hi, how are you?" And the first thing we say to them is, "I'm fine, thank you, how are you?" That's a very cultural thing as well. We don't let people into our day-to-day, traumatic, nasty experiences. Nobody, and I mean nobody, Soumya. I was working with big staff, and when my book came out and some of them read it, they approached me and they said, "Ritu, we could never imagine you were going through this while you were at school, because you never showed it and you always smiled." Because that's me. I smile a lot. That's my upbringing. You smile. You meet people, you smile. No matter what. I have been grateful in terms that I could speak for myself and that I was not dependent on anyone financially to say so. But then nobody could say that there's a problem there. Nobody could make it out. Unless I started speaking about it, and unless I told people directly about it, nobody could have imagined that there's an issue with this woman. Now, if you're talking about a woman who looks very well equipped to deal with everything, but still is very lost and very unaware and doesn't know where to go, what chances does a woman stand who's been uprooted from her homeland, been brought here, is being abused, can't speak the language, doesn't know who to ask, who to approach? So how can we answer that, Soumya? Are the services actually getting to these people? I don't know. Can they get to these people? I have no idea. How can they? So if these women, while they're being grown as young girls into women, if we taught them what abuse may look like, not because we wish that upon them, but because we want them to be very, very, like when you teach a child to cross a street, but look both ways, right? When you talk to a stranger, be wary. Things like that. And I'm saying women because I'm passionate about, I work with women, I work for women. But men and women should be taught. Young people should be taught what abuse looks like.
And you think those conversations need to happen far more within South Asian families and communities?
Do you mean they should, or they are happening, you mean?
Both.
They should definitely happen. And parents need to be very open about it. And it is the parents' responsibility. You want to protect your child, tell them. Tell them what good people look like. Tell them what not so very good people look like. Tell them what nasty people look like. Tell them what their actions may look like and what their intentions may be. It's not a very pretty picture, to be honest, to paint in front of young people and young children. But it may save them from a lot of pain and trauma. So absolutely they should happen very openly.
And you talked about the fact that a lot of people around you didn't know the struggles you were going through until they read your book.
Yeah.
Could you talk about the first book that you wrote?
Sure.
What led to you writing it? What was it called?
So the book was called Rich Man's Poor Daughter. And the title came up because that's exactly how I felt in that moment. My blood family left me. My friends left me. Some people who were very involved in my day-to-day life, friends, they left me because they could clearly see I was in need of help. So I was pretty much left on my own with my two little kids, aged 8 and 4 at the time, with nothing really to support me. So it was very, very difficult time. So the book came about because I wanted to tell people that for somebody like me who looks like me and talks like me and looks as if she's got everything under control, there's nothing under control really. You know, my life was totally messed up. My mental health was down the drain. I was suicidal. I was homeless for a few weeks. I had to find my way back into finding a rented accommodation, making sure my kids were safe, making sure I was providing for them. It was a very, very difficult time of my life. So the book came about to state the truth, the facts of our community and how they mostly would act. And you know what, Soumya, I realized after I started talking about it openly and advocating against domestic abuse and for women's rights, I found out it is not just my story. It's the story of many thousands of women. And they go through these things every single day and they get ignored because they don't have a voice. So my idea was to become the voice for the voiceless, to speak up for those who can't, and to let people know the truth, let them into the truth really, that the real nasty, ugly facts that your own family can be cruel to you. How can you let a young lady go through so much and not feel for her? How can a brother or a sister stand on her side, or a mum even, and watch you go through that and not raise an eyebrow, not question the guy who's done it, not offer you any support, rather add to your trauma and difficulties by pressurizing you about social and cultural stuff? So it was a very, very difficult time. But yes, the book came out with an understanding that this is not just my story. I'm going to relaunch the book. I've added a few bits into this and I'm going to call it Rich Man's Rich Daughter now. That's where I feel I am. I'm not poor daughter anymore. So that's the idea around the book.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the second one and reading it. Did your family ever read the book?
Some of them did, yeah.
And what was their reaction?
Most of them denied it ever happened. That's the easiest thing to say, isn't it? Because if they said, yes, she's saying the right thing, they'd have to take responsibility for it and then they'd have to do something about it. But the easiest way out is to deny that any of that happened. So yeah, it was denied. Most of it was denied. I was obviously very upset. It's hurtful when your own people do that, people you've grown up with, people you implicitly trust because they're blood family, and you should trust them. It should be like that. I still firmly believe in family values and the rest of it, and I have brought my children up with very strong family values, telling them to be there for each other, educating them around, supporting each other no matter what. Yeah, you fall out, you get back together, you try and understand the other person's perspective, things like that. But when that happened to me, it's obviously very, very hurtful.
And do you think ideas of family, community, honour prevent people from acknowledging the reality?
That is the one big thing that prevents them from acknowledging. Yeah, you're right. That is the biggest thing. And I think there's no value in there. Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about a human life, it should be about that human life. And I always say, unless you've been in that person's shoes, unless you've walked that journey, don't judge. And I think personally that's one biggest lesson for me as well in my lifetime, that judgment is surely something not to be acknowledged. A person is a person, even if they're not being 100% nice or right according to you. You don't know what their experiences are, you don't know what they've been through. So let them be. But yeah, so this cultural thing about, family judgment and how people are going to look at you and how they're going to judge you, I think that destroys a lot of lives, especially in our cultures.
What led to you compiling your second book, which you have with you?
Oh, this one, yeah.
You've got 33 women to trust
That's
you.
That's right, 33 women. And the biggest achievement I think about this book is that they're all from diverse backgrounds. And some of them I have not had met back then. And we just put it out, and I think people see the background that you come from. And Soumya, I'll talk from a very personal space here, that as and when I started speaking about my journey and how much I've suffered and how it's made me feel and how I'm trying to come out of it, I'm still saying I'm trying to come out of it, because healing is a long, long, long journey. And it may happen, it may not happen, but you've still got to keep working on it, right? So when I started talking about this, the number of women who reached out and felt safe to share their journey, not for any other reason. Some of them could not get to the book because of their circumstances and whatever, but they shared. And I think when you share your story honestly, truthfully, authentically, people do relate to that. They do feel safe. And I think that's where our cultural setup's so wrong, at hiding the facts, at saying, oh, no, our family is perfectly fine. We've never had any of such things in our family. All families have stuff. And I'm not saying flag it. I'm not saying go out and shout about it. But if it gets to a stage where one person is being broken or being damaged and the other person is getting advantage from there, I think somebody needs to speak up then.
And with your second book, the Anology, for those who are listening and watching, could you tell them the title and why that metaphor?
Oh, sure. Of course. So the book's called The New Woman, Stories of Kintsugi Experiences. So Kintsugi is a Japanese concept. You see those golden lines over there. So it's a concept of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. And the idea is that if something's damaged and broken, you don't necessarily have to throw it away. You can mend it. And it still has a mark of the damage, but it becomes even more beautiful and valuable. Just like many, many women I've seen. And the most amazing thing about this book, Soumya, and the women in it is many of them have had traumatic experiences, and they're varied stories, not just domestic abuse, but mental health, and chronic illnesses and family estrangement and loads of different topics. But most of them have come out the other end and now are working and to help other people gain awareness and make their lives better. So that's valuable. I think that's of major value there. That you've not just lived your experience and made it better for yourself, but you also have had the courage to come out and do something about it, help other people become better.
And how have your personal experiences and challenges shaped the work you do and your career?
Well, it's a direct reflection. Let's just say that it's a very direct reflection of the work I do, the career path I've chosen, all the projects that we run. It's a direct reflection.
And you're founded and direct a non-profit organisation. Could you tell us more about that? What is it called and what is your focus?
I'd love to talk about that, Soumya. So it's called Kaushalya UK. Kaushalya means a skilled woman. It's an Indian name. It's also my grandmother's name, my paternal grandma's name, who was a very powerful lady of her own times. And I got a lot of wisdom handed down from her, I believe, and also inspiration from her. So Kaushalya UK is a not-for-profit for women alone, and we run projects around health and well-being, personal professional development, and also domestic abuse support for women. Saying we support women does not mean we'll turn any man away who has had issues and happens to come knock on our door. We will be very happy to support anyone who's going through domestic abuse, but predominantly we work with women. The services are designed for women. So that's the main things that we do, but also we published this book in 2021. We're working on the second volume starting next year, which I'm very excited about. We started a community theatre under the organisation as well, and through that we'll be spreading awareness again around mental health and family dynamics and how things should change. So we continue. And in January we've got a mental health and domestic abuse awareness conference, which is a regular feature for every January. And then we celebrate Diversity Day, we celebrate Women's International Day, we take our service users for days out on day retreats. We do a lot of things. I quite enjoy it.
Can tell by the smile.
Yeah, thank you.
So you talked about domestic violence on men, because statistically women are more likely to face domestic abuse.
That's right.
But there are men. Are there any conversations within the South Asian community happening around South Asian men being victims?
It's very scanty, and I suppose there's still a huge stigma attached to it. Although some men that I know, they have started the conversation, but I think the response is very limited to that, for obvious reasons of being judged and sounding, to say so, like a sissy, because what are our men taught? And therefore I believe that they're equally victims of the system as much as women are. The perpetrator is a victim as well of the system. Of course, he inflicts abuse on the victim of domestic abuse, but he is also a victim, because what healthy human being in their head, Soumya, would want to damage another human being? It's damaged people damage people, hurt people hurt people. So I totally believe that the system is the culprit here. The values that we give boys when they're growing up. Oh, you the boy, you don't need to pick the cup up. Oh, you the boy, you don't need to learn to cook. And in my generation, it was very obvious. Next generation, we're getting to gradual change very, very slowly, which is very encouraging and lovely to see. But as I say, it's a long, long journey to take.
So for you, these South Asian communities need to change their mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we need to dismantle everything to rebuild ourselves. So everything we know. And keep challenging yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. Because we may have learned things that are not right. Or we may have learned things that worked 100 years ago, but they will not work now. So it's okay to challenge the learning that's given to you. And from my teaching years, I used to tell my students, every now and then, intelligent people will question everything. Intelligent people will question all the teachings that have been imparted to them. Intelligent people will ask repeatedly, why? Why should I do this? Not because we've always done this for 13 centuries. Not because my mum said, this is what I did, what my grandma did, what her grandma did, and so on. Why? Why should I do this? Or why can't I do this? Or how can I develop myself? And why am I not allowed to? Why are you so scared of my development? Why? Continue to ask, continue to break down what you've learned and relearn the new things. I think that's the only way forward.
Some would say that living in Britain, those from the South Asian community, the South Asian community itself, must have changed. Unshed some of the cultural traditions and ideals that reinforce gender inequality. Do you think that's the case, or do they cling to them more?
That is the case, but as I say, it's very, very small changes. That is the case on something very obvious. For example, when Baba Nanak came, Sati Pratha, do you know what Sati Pratha is? When the woman whose husband would pass away, they'd burn the woman alive in the pyre as well. That was Sati Pratha. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he challenged that, and that eventually came to a stop, legally as well. But it took centuries to do that. It didn't happen overnight. It took centuries to come to an end to that. That was an obvious gender-based abuse, if you like, that a woman must end her life with her husband as if she's a no one. But the mindsets that we have and the little things that we'll do, like, oh, girls should keep their mouths shut. Even if she's angry, she's not allowed to give her opinion. Now, I think the biggest imbalance happens, which I experienced personally as well as a young girl when I was in college and university, that I was given a mind through education. I was sent to the best colleges, schools and universities back home, and I was educated to the highest of standards, but I was not allowed to use my mind. So what is the point of educating someone and giving them their mind but not allowing them to use it? I think it's even further frustrating. So something like that. That's not changed massively, I'd say, in our cultural setups, in our communities.
And do you think that's the same for the South Asian community in Britain as well? Because that's framed with India. So do you feel that there's a similar reality here?
That's a very interesting question. And I'll tell you why I find it interesting, Samia, because back home people have moved on. Many people have moved on. But the people who came out of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, wherever, and they brought their values of 40, 50, 60 years ago, they're still holding on to the same values. They're still holding on to the same practices, same mindsets, and they're not willing to give them up. And I'll tell you the reason for that. Because that is our identity. We are Asians, we don't do this. We are Asians, we don't talk like this. We are Asians, we don't wear this. We are Asians, we don't discuss these topics. They're still holding on to the 60-year-old self that they brought out of their own homelands. That's dangerous because the world's moved on, but we haven't. So I think people in Britain, South Asian communities in Britain, are further messed up in a way because we're not open to change. This is our identity. And that's why the fanaticism. And that's why further conflicts and further issues.
So in Britain, do you think there's often a clash between a person's South Asian identity and what is their British identity? Do they conflict rather than merge?
I think mostly there is. And what happens is, and if you know enough young people, what they then do is they learn to live with split personalities. They'll have a British personality and they have a South Asian personality. So they learn how to act and talk and be in a South Asian setup a certain way, but they obviously will learn how to be British in a British setup, which is fair because genuinely you are in a British setup. So I'm not saying give up your South Asian self altogether. I love my culture, absolutely in love with the warmth it has and the vibrant, sides of it. And we are warm-hearted, welcoming, very hospitable people. I love those values, absolutely adore them, and I'd never give them up. And I love my faith and whatever I believe in. I love that side of things as well, and I would never give it up for anything at all. But I don't have to stick to what my grandma taught me in terms of gender-based roles. Oh, my mum showed me some stuff. I don't have to stick to that. I'm an educated, aware woman, and I can make my own choices. And that's, I think, the way forward for all of us.
And coming to Britain as you did, what do you think some of the key contributions the South Asian communities have made here?
South Asian communities have made loads of contribution. One, it would be so boring if we were not around. So at anything that we do, all the projects we run, all the celebratory events we do, Samia, we have a Bhangra music playing, right? We have a dance session, we have a Bhangra music. So we do bring that lift in the vibration side of things, but also not just that, literary aspects. I've seen loads of literary groups working, loads of South Asian women especially, leading loads of community and voluntary organizations, just like myself. And some of them have not had that lived experience. Some of them have observed that there is a problem and they still want to work. Do some work to contribute towards the change. So I think it's massive, the contribution.
As a final question, there's been a lot of tension. We had the riots early this year, tensions around belonging, the far right. Did that make you feel as someone who's identified as British South Asian?
Of course, you have to be careful when anything like that breaks out, and you become more aware and wary of your children while they're out or who they're out with, etc., etc. But deep down, I've always believed that it will not last, that it was very short-lived, and it was. Of course, it shakes you when something like this happens, and you do question like, oh, are we okay being here? But I always believed it was very short-lived, and I do believe that at heart, Britain is a very accepting, versatile, diverse community, and in the long term, I don't feel threatened at all. So yeah.